Hello, everyone. We're going to give it just a moment as folks are logging in, and then we'll get started. All right. Well, we have quite a bit on the agenda today, so we're just going to jump right in and get started as people are joining us. So thank you so much. Welcome to the HL7 Da Vinci Community Roundtable. Today we are going to be discussing actionable insights on improving burden reduction, payer data exchange, and patient cost transparency, not necessarily in that order. I'm Denise St. Clair, and I'm very happy to be moderating today's Community Roundtable and to remind us all that we engage in these forums under HL7's antitrust policies to ensure appropriate collaboration and information sharing. So today's session is going to focus on the Da Vinci community and how we are transforming healthcare, taking burden reduction, payer data exchange implementation guides, which were called out in the CMS 0057 final rule in particular, to pilot and production. So we are making implementation real, and we're going to get to hear more about that from firsthand accounts from our partners at Providence and Multicare Connected Care. And because pilots are such a critical and important way that we can bring our IGs to life, we're going to talk about recent developments with the patient cost transparency IG and pilots. We are actually awaiting an upcoming regulation on patient cost transparency that was signaled in the most recent unified agenda. And we'll talk more broadly about how Da Vinci supports piloting through the Da Vinci Trebuchet project. So I'm honored today to be joined by a rockstar panel, as always, on our community roundtables. So happy to get to speak with you with Karen Ashton, Michael Gould, Scott Rosenthal, and Michael Westover. So they're the really amazing people that you want to hear from. So we'll get through some of the front matter, talk about some of these pieces, and then get right into the really, really good stuff. So first things first, your lines are muted, and obviously we are recording, so we want to make sure we maintain that recording quality. If you have a question, and we strongly encourage you to ask us questions, please use the Q&A menu option to submit questions. The chat has been disabled, but you will see very useful information coming to you through the chat from Leslie. So thank you for that, Leslie. At the end of the webinar, there'll be a survey. Please do fill that out. That's incredibly helpful for us. And as always, you can find recordings for the sessions on the Confluence page, as well as a wealth of additional information about all of the amazing work everyone is doing throughout Da Vinci. We will let you know that our next meeting is going to be held on December 10th at 4 o'clock. We do have a bit of a cadence change coming. We will be meeting on the fourth Wednesday at 4 Eastern due to holidays. So keep that in mind. Our next meeting will be a joint meeting with the member forum. And of course, as always, you can stay informed through the listserv and the general Da Vinci listserv, as well as the use case listserv. So check out the links. And you can always register, get registration details for all events and things through the Da Vinci calendar. And again, go to the Confluence page, tons of wonderful information, including recordings and slides for all meetings. We have a bunch going on and want to make sure everybody knows about things coming up that could be of interest to you very soon, because it is apparently November in very short order. The WEDI National Conference is happening in DC, November 3rd through the 6th, and there'll be quite a few very relevant conversations to the work that we do. The Sequoia Project and Care Equality annual meeting is going to be in Nashville, November 19th and 20th. The ASTP annual meeting is a little later than usual this year. It's usually in early December. It's going to be in February this year. So the save the date has come out. Do keep an eye on the website for more information about registration. But that's always an incredibly informative meeting in DC. HL7 has a virtual Connectathon and work group meeting coming up in January, so you can officially register. Do keep an eye on Connectathon dates for track registration and getting engaged and involved. So the Connectathon is going to be January 13th through the 15th, and then the working group meeting is going to be January 26th through the 30th. And again, the January meetings are all virtual. So it's a wonderful opportunity to be able to engage in both the Connectathon and the work group meeting, especially if you're an observer. Generally speaking, for the Connectathon, the virtual opportunity is really quite wonderful. So do keep an eye on both of those upcoming events. We are talking a lot about CMS 0057, the interoperability and prior authorization final rule today, and pilots around work we're doing in that space. So we also want to give you some prior authorization updates, as has been a big focus of what we're doing here at Da Vinci. We have been having a series of burden reduction focus groups, an opportunity for everyone with an interest in the burden reduction IGs to get together and talk through the issues at hand, concerns, questions, items coming up from the working group meetings, etc. The next focus group is tomorrow at 4 Eastern. We have the Zoom link, and there's a bunch of information on Confluence. You can see the notes from all of the previous focus group meetings and all the information that has been discussed. So it's really a wonderful opportunity to learn more about what the community is talking through. And a huge thanks to Lloyd McKenzie for leading those burden reduction focus group sessions. Related to the work that's been going on in the focus groups, the AMA recently released a joint letter talking about their key areas of interest in ensuring that the burden reduction IDs really meet the needs of patients. One of the things in particular that the AMA noted was the importance of having the opportunity for prior authorization to happen within the physician's workflow to really keep the patient and the provider engaged in that process. So that letter is available for review, and the Da Vinci community is very thankful for all of our very engaged stakeholders who are part of this process and working through to help us do the best we can for patients, providers, and payers as we work to make healthcare better with our work through the Da Vinci Project. So check that out. We have been getting together a group of folks once a month in a prior authorization implementers meeting. The next meeting is Monday, November 3rd from 1 to 2. You can find out more about the implementers meeting on our Confluence page. It is open to everyone. It's implementers, anybody implementing. So you don't have to be a Da Vinci member to engage in the prior authorization implementers group. It's really an opportunity for us all to learn from each other. What are folks doing? How's it going? The good, the bad, and the ugly of implementation of each of the 3 implementation guides that fall under the burden reduction umbrella, CRD, DTR, and PAS. So it's a really wonderful opportunity. Last month, we started a process of having our implementers demo their solutions to bringing the implementation guides to life, and we'll be continuing that on a monthly basis. So if you're interested in learning more about the implementers group or getting directly engaged, please visit the Confluence page, and you may see a note to email me, and I'll be happy to help you get engaged with that group. And then the burden reduction ballot reconciliation process. So we have just gone through a ballot for our burden reduction implementation guides, and through a series of meetings, predominantly Wednesdays and Fridays, the teams are working through all of the ballot comments and the many JIRA tickets associated with that ballot reconciliation process. So we strongly encourage everyone to get engaged in that process, to be part of that process. You can learn more about each of the sessions that are ongoing, the weekly meetings via Confluence, get the Zoom links and get engaged there. So strongly encourage engagement across the board with the many, many things happening with prior authorization right now. So with that, we're going to switch gears from prior authorization for a moment, and talk a little bit about what the Da Vinci crew has been doing related to patient cost transparency. So obviously, a main point of our discussion today with you is piloting and the value of pilots to help bring our implementation guides to life in production and in the real world. And so patient cost transparency is one use case that has really been moving forward at an impressive clip. And a huge thank you to Vanessa Candelora and Corey Spears, who lead all things patient cost transparency. I'm providing an update today, but we have them to thank for shepherding all this through. So for those of you who may not be as familiar with the patient cost transparency project, the IG addresses information presented in the No Surprises Act that was enacted as part of the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2021. And what it does is it requires that a good faith estimate, or GFE, with a payer that a provider share a good faith estimate with a payer, and a payer make an advanced explanation of benefits, or AEOB, available to a patient in advance of a service. It also does note that if the patient just doesn't have an official service, or if they're a not covered by insurance, that they can just get a good faith estimate directly from the provider, go directly to the patient. But what this is ultimately doing is allowing you as a patient to go to a provider and learn more about what your costs will be before you get a service. So you really understand exactly what's happening. And of course, the driving force here was to eliminate surprise bills, those bills where you think you were in network and all of a sudden you get this phenomenally huge bill, and we know how unbelievably challenging and troubling that can be for the average patient. So that's what the problem that we were looking to solve with PCT. And this can be triggered by both a request and a scheduled service. So the opportunity to say, hey, I'm kind of interested in this, or I might get this service. Can I find out how much it will cost, versus I have a scheduled service, and so therefore there are a set number of days per the law that a provider and payer have to share this information back with the patient. So the team has been working on this for quite some time, and so many of you have been phenomenally engaged in this work. And we are very excited to say that STU2, the second iteration of the IG, officially published this month. One of the big updates was supporting a good faith estimate data exchange via the FHIR-based APIs with multiple providers. But there is a ton of amazingly good work in this IG. And I had to call it out. We've got a screenshot of it here for you on the slide. This is one of the most beautiful change logs you've ever seen in an implementation guide. Huge shout out to Corey Spears. It is really, really helpful and really valuable to see exactly what's changed from STU1 to STU2, and really understand how that came about through our phenomenal consensus process, testing process, learning process to get us to the second iteration of this IG. One of the other really interesting pieces of the puzzle of STU2 is that it brings forward an AEOB summary, an advanced explanation of benefits summary. And what the summary profile does is it gives a roll-up or a high-level picture of that the patient can clearly see. What do I owe? If this service or this period of care requires me to have 3 or 4 different things done, then what am I going to owe? What is this really going to look like when all is said and done? And then they can drill down into the pieces and understand, which each of the providers or facilities in the process may bring to the table in terms of cost, but they really can get that true sense of what you as a patient need to know to really understand what you're going to incur in terms of cost. So really impressive work, and you can learn more on our Confluence page and via the IG itself. And one of the really fascinating and amazing pieces of this work has been a pilot project that has been ongoing. We have phenomenal participants who have done just an amazing amount of work, all noted here. And we just hit our second series of milestones with the most recent Connectathon. Of course, there's a ton of work, meetings, and testing going on between those official Connectathons, but you can see some of the big accomplishments that the group managed to see through in our last big testing event. And so we're really seeing these IGs come to life. We're seeing it work, and that's exactly what we need. And more importantly, we're seeing where folks struggle and where folks fail, and so that we can learn how to make things better, how to make things work in production. You know, it's always important to fail fast and learn quickly, and then be successful moving forward. You can learn a lot more about the PCT pilots at the link on the screen. We strongly encourage you to take part. Everyone is welcome to take part in the pilot project. We'd love to see more providers engaged, and we have a wonderful, wonderful vendor partners, but we would love to see payers, providers, provider vendors, everyone at the table so we can continue to test. As we mentioned, we do anticipate additional regulation coming out around the AEOB in particular. This is something we've been waiting for since the No Surprises Act was passed. The unified agenda signals something's on the way, and of course, this IG will really help people meet those requirements. So as we're getting closer to a regulatory reality, we really encourage you to get involved and help this be successful and lead the charge. Be the definer of the solution by engaging in the pilots. So we are very excited about that. Reach out to the PMO, get engaged, be involved, and support this wonderful work. So one more piece of information from me, and then I'll get to pass things over. But because we're going to spend a good amount of time talking about prior authorization and what that looks like in the real world, we'll just level set really quickly on what it is that was required in the CMS 0057 regulation. And of course, again, that is the interoperability and prior authorization final rule. So you've seen this before, but at the highest level for prior authorization, the rule calls for what it refers to as a prior authorization application programming interface. And it's an API that must provide a list of covered items and services, identify documentation requirements for prior authorization approval, and support a prior authorization request and response, all of course through a FHIR-based API. As we know, regulations today strongly recommend, and CMS has very recently reiterated that very strong recommendation for using specific implementation guides. They specifically called out the 3 Da Vinci burden reduction guides, specifically coverage requirements discovery, CRD, documentation templates and rules, DTR, and prior authorization support, or PAS. And the rule also did bring forward enforcement discretion so that the prior authorization transaction could happen fully through a FHIR-based API. And so that's a critical piece of the puzzle because, as we know, the current rules are to leverage HIPAA X12 278. So this provides the opportunity to use FHIR instead. In addition to the API itself, there are a number of important pieces of the prior authorization puzzle also called out in the regulation, in particular, the decision timeframes. So an urgent prior authorization must be adjudicated in 72 hours, non-urgent in 7 calendar days. There is the need to provide a denial reason if a prior authorization is denied, and to make sure that the provider has notice of the decision. And there is the need to report metrics. And the public reporting of prior authorization metrics is actually coming very quickly to reality. So by March 31, 2026, folks need to be reporting on metrics for the previous year. And these are meant to be the baseline that once these implementations kick in 2027, that there's metrics to compare against. And that's something you'll actually hear us talk about a lot in the implementers meeting, as well as what metrics can we capture in addition to what you are required to capture for those who are implicated by the rule, which of course I should state are all of the payers that CMS has authority to regulate. So that's Medicare Advantage, Medicaid and CHIP, fee-for-service and managed care, as well as plans on the federally facilitated exchanges. And of course, you know, HTI-4 recently came out, which also establishes a certification criteria for a number of APIs, including the prior authorization APIs, which may signal where there could be opportunity on the provider side there as well. So with all of that context, I am going to turn things over to the folks who are going to talk about the super fun stuff. So first we have Scott, and Scott, as solution architect with eHealth Exchange, is going to tell us about Vinci Trebuchet. Scott, all yours.
Thanks, Denise. Yeah, so I'm Scott Rosignol. I work as one of the co-leads of the Vinci Trebuchet working group, and here to talk to you a little bit about how Trebuchet works and try and get you to join. So let's go ahead and move on to the next slide, please, Denise. All right, so a bit of words on this slide. I think basically the goals of Trebuchet are to help launch payer and provider collaboration into test non-production and production environments. We want to bring the community together to help define use cases within the IGs to solve problems that the IGs don't have direct guidance around, and share knowledge. One of the best things that we do is to share knowledge, and Michael Westover and Karen are going to help us with some of that detail, provide some of that detail in the following sections here. So we have a strategy to assist with pilot work. We'll talk more about that strategy. We have a long-term vision here. We're not thinking about the next 2 weeks. We're thinking about the next 2 years. And we'll tell you a little bit more about what that strategy looks like. And a lot of the work that we do is to facilitate pilot work, as well as testing work among participants to help folks feel ready for the implementation guide deadlines and to feel ready for a production go live. Next slide, please. So what Trebuchet is a series of biweekly meetings. We have a core group that meets weekly or biweekly, and then the public meetings are also biweekly on the off weeks. The Vinci Trebuchet project is focused on, it's available to participants of DaVinci and non-DaVinci participants. So anybody can join, and we really do want the entire community to join up here. This is not something where we want to gate access because it's just knowledge, and we want to share that everywhere. We allow folks to bring topics to the meetings. We can help set the agenda with them and allow folks to chime in ad hoc as well. We help pair organizations to help each other help them find different organizations to do pilot work with. And we really try and leverage like the IGs and the use cases that we're seeing actually work in the real world to simplify pilot planning. So if there's a use case out there that works in, within a given implementation guide, and by that I mean like one of the CRD CDS hooks where you're testing that use case, or you're testing a specific pattern within burden reduction or within CDEX, we try and bring that to life, and we try and get a lot of folks on the same page using that same use case, because it allows us to overcome some of the problems that are very specific to the implementation process. All right, next slide, please. So organizations that wish to pilot in the Vinci Trebuchet program are able to follow our pilot structure, which is essentially as a quarterly cohorts. And we're still working to build cohorts and to really get a good group of testers together around specific use cases. So we're still hoping folks can sign up and bring their systems so that they can pilot. We are welcoming of anybody, as I mentioned before. You can access the sign up link on the Vinci Trebuchet Confluence page. Each cohort is specific to a implementation guide and potentially a use case. So we try and design these so that there are pilot participants on both sides of the equation. So a payer provider for prior authorization, or two payers for a payer-to-payer transaction. But we also include those natural or intermediary type organizations that would be present in the real world. So, one thing we'll talk about more is vendors. Vendors can act as a payer or as a provider in a pilot, or they can act on behalf of their customers, or they can bring their customer with them in pilot. We really allow any kind of combination of organizations so that folks that are interested can get the experience actually testing with others, which is a great way to battle harden your product and really make sure it's ready for production and rollout. We are scheduling cohorts well in advance. What we want to do is allow organizations to plan around when they'll be able to start piloting. So if you're thinking, yeah, I'm not ready for this IG, but I really want to, and our roadmap is showing that this is going to be ready for us to start testing in June, that's why we have the cohort quarterly sign up process. You can sign up for the Q2 or Q3 cohort and you're ready to go. When your software is ready to go, there will be a pilot ready for you. Next slide, please. So what we look for from our participants is sort of a tiered experience here. We have expectations of participants solely to help you understand what time commitment is required and what we're really looking for from you, so that you have strong expectations that you can pass around internally with your organization so that you can allocate time. The experience of a cohort participant is really first to get signed up and await your quarter that you signed up for. With most of the implementation guides, we do a pre-pilot testing process that allows us to actually test your software before you start using it in a pilot. This helps to really get through a bunch of questions that might come up that you weren't able to surface during your own internal testing. Oftentimes it's because the data is unique. The payloads you're receiving are unique, and you need to be able to ensure that you're able to handle those, or that you're able to give good advice to the other side, the tester, the piloter, when you run this issue in the future. It's really helping every organization build a better understanding of how their software works. If a FHIR resource, for example, has a profile set in it, does that make your software break? And it shouldn't. There are a lot of different questions that are going to come up as you actually start using software in the real world, and you start getting experience with payloads that weren't generated internally for your own testing purposes. And that's the point of pre-pilot testing, is to surface those concerns, address them, and allow us to build that knowledge up so that other folks don't have to deal with the same problems. The next step in the pilot process is the point-to-point pilot work. This allows two organizations to get together and to pilot their software across a couple of different, happy path or even error-based use cases to make sure that things are functioning in the way they expect. Where we can go from there is optional, but it does allow organizations to really experience what an IG might feel like in a networked environment where you're actually communicating across many different trading partners. That might mean a number of different providers are submitting CRD requests to a payer, or it might mean a payer-to-payer pilot that has 10 different payers included. This kind of environment allows all types of organizations to really better understand how their software behaves across different payloads of data again, but then it really includes that intermediary aspect. You might think about a Tefka QHIN here, or you might think about, some other intermediaries like your clearinghouse could act and how they would behave in this kind of environment. This is really important because it brings us to that level of production readiness and it really helps us evolve as a community to say that we all know our roles and we know how to complete our roles as part of this new process, this new technology that we are enabling. The last step in the process is that post-cohort engagement, where we really want our piloters to remain, to at least continue to join meetings, to share their lessons and to help other folks stand on their shoulders, but also to provide their systems so that there's additional systems available for testing for the newcomers. Right. This is just a flavor of some of the use cases that we've defined. We have different pilots ongoing for member attribution and burden reduction. We are doing work around clinical data exchange and payer-to-payer data exchange, trying to bring pilots to life in those areas. We have pilots ongoing for provider access as well, and we've been talking a lot about how we could make a TEFCA FHIR pilot work. And are definitely very interested in bringing that to life. So we're supporting the Da Vinci implementation guides, as you can see here, but we also allow for some flexibility. This isn't about being very strict and setting specific rules that everyone must follow regarding use cases and implementation guides. But what we do want to do is focus our energies around payer-provider interoperability and payer-payer interoperability. That's the goal of the working group. Okay, so we do provide some testing tools to participants, which give you a leg up. We provide different capabilities depending on the implementation guide, of course. There's different tests that you might want to use. So in addition to HL7 Inferno, which of course everyone's using, the Trebuchet program allows access to smart on FHIR applications, to a basic EHR for testing purposes. And it really allows organizations to kind of better understand how their software works with that other party without actually involving a provider or an EHR company and the overhead that might require. So this is really valuable, especially in the burden reduction space today. It allows for a lot of that pre-pilot testing in a manner that really wouldn't exist if we didn't have these vendors making available software to do the work. Okay. There are expectations for the piloters here, and you can read through these. The reason we set these expectations is, again, for that baseline of here's what we really think that you need to do if you're going to do a pilot. This is what a pilot means. It means that you are allowing access to your system, that you're not entering into a pilot where you don't actually trade data. It means that you're joining meetings and that you're sharing your lessons learned during those meetings. As well as other, just basic expectations. So this is really here so that folks that are interested in piloting can take this information back and say, these are the expectations that we as an organization need to meet, and this is how we can identify how much time we might spend on a pilot and allocate resources properly. Next slide, please. All right. One of the big things here is that the most successful space that we've had so far is with vendors that have joined Da Vinci or just joined Trebuchet specifically, and that's because vendors are really ready and they're financially motivated to be able to perform this pilot work, as opposed to payers are still working on different aspects of their implementations, or providers are waiting on their EHRs. We have a lot of vendors in the space right now, and we're welcoming to all vendors. We really want to see vendors come in so that we can all work together on those shared expectations and test together so that we are creating software that goes out to our payers and provider customers and works. So we love having vendors on the call, and we really want vendors to participate in Trebuchet because they help enhance the ecosystem and really are these vendors are building the software that will be the building blocks for the future for all the organizations that are adopting IGs. We also see a lot of use cases that require more than two parties. I'm with the Health Exchange. We're an intermediary, and we help connect different parties. There are other organizations out there like clearinghouses that do the same thing. And those kinds of vendors are very important to a scalable, networked interaction in the future. You need to have that networked interoperability in order for this to work. And so we really need those organizations to come together and be able to agree upon certain topics, like how will we send data to each other? How will we expect our participants to send data to us? How will we authenticate when we send data to each other? There's a lot of different topics there, and we need to start talking about these things in order to be successful in the future, because there is no implementation guide right now for this work. So really what the work we're doing right now is going to set the future direction for everybody in the healthcare space. And that's important. It's really important for us to focus on that and get that work done. Next slide, thanks. All right, so I wanted to highlight a couple of recent lessons learned as well with you before I hand this off. What the value here isn't for you all to take these specific lessons learned home and say that, oh, we have to make sure our development accommodates this. It's really for you to understand the level of detail that we are getting into with the implementation guides, and the value that your organization can get from that same level of detail and interaction. So one of the things that we've done recently is help to expose development assumptions that break in the real world. And I've been talking about this a lot and already. The FHIR profiling concept, where you pull data from a given EHR and it's profiled as USCDI. There are systems that aren't able to accept a FHIR profile for USCDI when it's a CRD workflow. So what does that mean? Like, how do we actually deal with that problem? Maybe we have to bring that back to the IG authors. This is something that we're starting to talk about, because in the real world, this is going to happen. You're going to see FHIR profiles on the data that you receive, and your system needs to be able to manage that, or we need to be able to point to documentation that says this shouldn't happen. The Trebuchet testing, going down the second bullet point here, Trebuchet testing and piloting helps organizations figure out how they are going to proceed, and moving forward with this software and the deployment helps you get your internal house in order. Primarily what this means is that every process that happens, you might have a team that owns that process, but there are individuals who are going to play key roles. And those individuals need to surface and come to the table to do something like test their endpoints and obtain feedback and take action on that feedback when you're doing that testing. So getting your internal house in order doesn't mean that you don't already have a team and an understanding of who those folks are on the team. It's understanding who are the actual people that are going to deliver on certain topics and building that relationship internally as you start doing the thing that you've been building and planning for some time. This is really important because there are very few instances in the real world where payers and providers are interacting in using FHIR today. And if you think about FHIR in the industry, it requires a different team on both the provider and the payer side. And these individuals don't interact today. Providers and payers interact at certain levels, and that's not usually at the IT level. And so there is a lot of work to do internally to find the right people, to bring them to the table, to identify the right teams that are involved in a process, and to actually build the support knowledge base and structure that you need to make sure that these IGs are testable and supportable moving forward. Okay, so Trebuchet testing lets you wade into the complexity. I've talked about this a lot already. I really love the vendor-to-vendor testing because it's very low stakes, it's high value for all of the parties involved, and it allows us to really dial in the software and create all of these different, edge case. It allows you to handle edge cases because you've seen them already once you get to the real world. So we're able to surface a lot of those complexities of the IGs by doing this testing together. I also really enjoy that we have this mock provider process, the idea of the EHR that's available for us, because it really helps payers test their software without having to bother a provider organization at all, without having to build their own testing tools. This is a really huge value for payers to be able to perform this testing and get all this value of a full provider integration without actually having to bring a provider to the table or bring an EHR to the table. Finally, you're going to see in a moment all of the great insights that Michael and Karen have around the outcomes that they've already obtained through some of the work they're doing. And so I really want that education piece to be top of mind. The education that we provide to the community as Trebuchet is as important as the testing we're doing with individual providers and payers. And we really want to like level that education up and bring new insights and capabilities to the community as we bring more pilots up and running. Yeah. Okay. Next slide, please. Please get involved. It is just a single meeting every other week. The Zoom information's on the slide. We have pilot cohorts that are in the planning process right now, payer to payer, prior authorization, and some bulk fire and HEDIS work as well. But we're open to creating other cohorts and doing other pilots based on what your needs are. And I also just want to extend a thank you to all the folks that are joining the calls and participating today. I've gotten a lot of value out of the Trebuchet process, and really like that's because of everybody else that's been involved. So thank you all for your time. I think we can move on to the next presenter.
Great. Thank you so much, Scott. Incredibly helpful and incredibly amazing work that Vinci Trebuchet is doing. So huge, huge thank you. And speaking of amazing work that's happening in Trebuchet pilots, I am now going to turn things over to Karen, who is the Director of Population Health and Digital Solutions at Multicare Connected Care. So Karen, it is all yours.
Thank you. And you can hear me well?
Yes.
Great. Hello, all. Thank you, Karen Ashton. I've been with Multicare for 15 years. I have a background as a systems engineer, but I have a passion in understanding business and technical requirements and developing our solutions. So I've been involved with interoperability since I started at Multicare, beginning with our onboarding to eHealth Exchange in our Washington State HIE. And that evolved to our value-based care and population health and our FHIR journey in my current role as the Pop Health Digital Solutions area. So I wanted to just pause for a moment on this slide and say, the patient story for the providers out there, that's key in healthcare. So I wanted to just share a little bit about our interop story before I provide some brief updates on our current pilots. So at Multicare, our interoperability strategy is routed in FHIR first architecture, and that's for clinical and administrative data exchange. We want a consumer-centered design to reduce friction and improve care access, and also scalable solutions that support the national standards and our local innovation. So I'm going to talk about the whys. Why Da Vinci, why Trebuchet? We need strong partnerships to accomplish this work. And that's internally with your own operations team and understanding the workflows, and externally. And this is what this community is all about. The various implementation guide work groups and Trebuchet itself, they bring us together so that we can practically accomplish the FHIR digital ecosystem. Now, with regard to why we chose the use cases that we chose, we need to know our members, back to the patient story. So we're involved in the ATR, the attribution, sharing of data. We do patient data exchange in the provider access API because we want to bring together all parts of the patient story, the claims and the clinical. And of course, burden reduction is key. There's regulations, but the prior auth workflows have taken such a long time. And we made that decision pretty rapidly to join Da Vinci in the prior auth use case with regions when we sat down once with our ops partners and went through. We had 2 pages of little tiny diagrams about this workflow, and the time took so long, and we knew right then and there that was going to be one of our use cases. So again, overall, this is valuable because we have standard APIs, standard data elements, IGs, and we eliminate, our goal is really to eliminate flat file sharing and really control the movement of storage. So movement and data and storage of the data that we're sharing. So I'm going to go to the next slide and talk a little bit about our current use cases that we're working on. So I'm going to focus first on the provider data exchange, and we're doing 2 pilots with Regions Cambia today. One is related to both CDEX and FHIR, and then the provider access API. So we've tested both CDEX and the bulk FHIR API. And our current use case, we are using CDEX to really capture, acquire that data from our our largest population, which is in our EPIC system. And we do that through the CDEX mechanism because we have tens of thousands of patients in our groups. And so we do that using the CDEX, and it's as my Providence friends will say, it's the chatty way that we extract the data. And then we bring that into our FHIR services and do the bulk FHIR, a product that we built in our Azure platform. And that's so that regions can retrieve that data via our API management process. So that's how we made this use case work for us. In that process, we discovered as we were pulling data out of our largest EHR that's part of this, that we're causing some slowness in running the data out. And we had, in EPIC, they call them interconnect servers. And in those servers, there were other functions like mobile applications running and different things like that supported other parts of our business. And we wanted to be able to run these jobs that would extract large payloads out of EPIC. So we took a step back, and one of the things that we wanted to share with the group is that we really took some time to think about, well, how do we make this work better? So we optimized our infrastructure by building dedicated FHIR services for our data acquisition out of EPIC. We've had this in place for a few weeks now, and as you'll see on the slide there, that we have an increase in from 50 to 70% reduction in the runtime to collect this data, which is great because we're doing this pilot with EPIC. At the same time, this is an infrastructure with the support other use cases. At the same time, we're collecting data now for the purposes of CMS, and Medicare shared savings reporting. So we need to be able to run multiple jobs to extract that data out. So we're happy we have that in place, and we're continuing to now be able to have this platform where we can run several jobs. Here's for regions, here's for MSSP, here's for another payer partner. So then the other thing, what's happening now is we've acquired the data because we've had this up and running for a few weeks now, and we're focused on a specific value-based arrangement contract for regions to run through the HEDIS and their HEDIS engine. So part of that process is we went back and we looked at our ATR attribution and made some adjustments to that so we could identify the actual population that we wanted to use for this particular use case. So, and then as the future, because we've tested CDEX, we know how to use that now. And I neglected to say at the beginning that this is done through the network FHIR concept. So we're partnering with both regions and eHealth Exchange in these ones. And so in the future, we're looking at CDEX for that single patient transaction and to support utilization management or even follow up from a prior authorization workflow. That requires a lot of operational coordination. So that's what we're in talks about now, so we can figure out how can we make that happen and test it out with our operational partners. So I'm going to move on to the next slide, tell you a little bit about what we're doing with the Provider Access API. And we're doing this for claims data exchange. And so we've worked, and why this use case? I'll just share the background that over the last year and a half at our health system and in our population arm of Multicare Connecticare, we've built out a data mart. And part of that building out of data mart was a lot of acquiring flat files that are sitting, in SharePoints or LANs securely, of course, but sitting in many, many different places. And so we really wanted to initiate this use case. So regions provided a sample patient population so we could test this out. And so we've acquired that data. We did it manual since this is a sample group through a Postman package. And we've done the initial validation on that data, that claims data that came in, and it showed expected results. And of course, we're using standards, which is like we've had experience with CMS BCDA. So that allows us to really, we know having these standards will make the work to map the fields in our data mart minimal. So, and that's the next step. So we're going to learn a little bit more about that one, and then hopefully we can eliminate the sharing of flat files and use the provider access API with regions and others of the future. And then I wanted to also, next slide, just you may have heard our story before about what we've done with the Region Smart Auth. Just wanted to share, we've had this in production for a couple of years. This is a Smart on FHIR application that incorporates all three of the burden reduction IGs. Listed the scope of services there. You know, we still meet monthly with regions to review the use of our tool, optimizations there, and bring in our pre-service, which is a central team, and our referral coordinators. And we want to share this because we have ongoing collaborations and still sharing these experience. And we've been talking to our Epic vendor partner about the one app to support multiple payers and really the capabilities to auto launch within workflows. So we're having discussions there, sharing our experiences, kind of giving those requirements of here's what we as a provider would like to see in the workflows. And those workflows would include the provider patient interaction, the referral staff interaction, as well as other things like if you have imaging or radiology orders that you can auto launch just based on what they are. And we want that in addition to the button we have today, that magic button we've called it, because that allows in any workflow to just click and launch the app. The other thing I wanted to highlight as part of our collaboration and sharing experiences is that we've sponsored a Washington State education initiative, and this it is focused on the regulation and the requirements, really to bring everybody on board and start and make sure everybody's hearing about what needs to happen, when it needs to happen, and really sharing our experiences that, hey, this is going to make your experience better, faster, quicker, and it's all about the patient. They get in faster to seek care. So the next slide is where I'll wrap up. And because the visual is always a great way to show the why. And as you'll see here, majority of the requests that go through the prior authorization is no PA required. And that happens in a matter of seconds versus the time it would take to make a phone call, send a fax, and get it back. What I want to point out on this one is the 16%, which is regions in the application. They codified with one of their partners the intelligence that you can auto process certain real-time procedures. And so that means that it's collecting the data through the FHIR resources, sending it off when they get what they need so they can say, yes, this one is done in that moment. So if you look at this, then really it's the 7% that is appended for review that then reverts back to our humans are going to talk to each other. So just wanted to end on that one because it just really shows why this is so key in leveraging this technology. And I want to thank you, and certainly happy to collaborate if there's any questions. And now over to Michael.
Yes,
Go ahead,
thank
Denise.
you so much, Karen. We really appreciate it. It's amazing to see the phenomenal work being done, and we're going to hear more from Michael on that. But this stuff is real, and it has really positive benefits and outcomes, and to see that ROI is really impressive. So thank you so much, Karen. And now we do turn to Michael. So Michael's going to tell us a little bit about what you've been up to at Providence. Michael is the Vice President of Population Health at Providence. So Michael, all you.
Sure. Thank you, Denise. All right, let's jump into it and get to the next slide. All right, so something exciting that's happened at Providence over the past couple of days. Providence and Humana just made a joint press release together about our commitment to interoperability, data standards, and modern APIs, and really backed by, I mean, the Vinci Trebuchet project, the Da Vinci project, Trebuchet, all of that. Is the backbone of a lot of this work that we're doing. And I want to talk to you about why we're doing this initiative, like what we're hoping to get out of it, how we think it's going to change healthcare in America, and I mean, answer any questions that you have. So you can see a little bit about the, this is just announced on Monday. And the idea is that really the background is that Providence receives hundreds of data formats right now related to value-based care, and really tens of thousands of data files every year, which is not very scalable. Think ugly Excel spreadsheets, multiple tabs, different formats, hundreds of different connection points to pull this data in, and we're trying to move away from that. And Humana's on board as well too, because they get so many data formats from provider organizations across the country. And so the idea here is we came together and we said, what information does Humana need to be successful in value-based care? And then Providence said, this is the information that we need to be successful in value-based care and scale it to take care of our patient populations that we jointly manage together. We think this is exciting. I'm going to get into more detail on the next slide, but before we go there, we also want to be able to scale these exchange capabilities to additional payers affiliated with Providence and to providers associated with Humana. So this is not just a special Humana Providence thing. This is something where we want to share everything that we learn with anybody who wants to hear, that it can help all of the payers that Providence interacts with, all of the providers that Humana interacts with. And I hope, I pray that the vendors can come along with us too, because we really don't have the luxury to have 11 different vendors all with their pet formats, and we have to write queries out of our systems to send data to those vendors to support our core operations. We cannot get away with the time and energy and expense and the mistakes and really the impact of patient care that happens when the data is non-standard. It takes a long time to process, and it gets things wrong. We don't have the luxury of hiring the armies of people it takes to do that work. So if we can align around national data standards, we can do this. This is working Providence. This is point-to-point, Humana and Providence with direct connections to each other. But really, we're trying to figure out the underlying foundational data elements. And once you have the ways to exchange data between Providence and Humana through modern APIs, it's easy enough to add the network layers on top of it through CMS-aligned networks. And we're very supportive of the government initiatives right now to scale the use of data exchange. Okay, next slide. All right, so this is a quick summary of where we are with our use of FHIR and modern APIs. And I know that Trebuchet, we talk a lot about pilots, but we're at Providence, I think at Multicare too, like we're getting beyond the pilot phase and actually getting into production with a bunch of our partners where we've seen that it is working, and it's working on a month-to-month basis. Like we feel like it's a way that we can scale value-based care across our partners. So let's look at the different meaningful data sets. And you can see this is not driven by compliance. This is driven by what do our organizations need to be successful. I think that's really important. So what do you need to be successful? I think Karen mentioned this. You need member rosters. Like, who are the people that we're jointly managing together? So that is a foundational. We're going into production with Humana this month with member rosters using, HL7 FHIR format. And we're in production with Regents. We're in production with Premera today. And you might ask, like, what makes the Humana Providence relationship special? I think it's important to have a national player like Humana in this race, where they've said, we are going to do this with Providence. But then after we're done with Providence, they have a bunch of other providers in the queue and other vendors that would like to receive the data in this format. And so they're starting with Providence, but then as soon as we go into prod, they're going to start working with others and then just scaling out, right? So then claims details for those populations. So, and this is foundational information around financials and other things we need to know about our value-based care populations. Which services are our members having outside of Providence's walls? And these are, claims for services that are provided that we have a joint value-based care arrangement. So we're responsible for these claims. And so we need to be able to exchange these much more efficiently than we are now. And I think we have something like 45 claims formats that we receive right now. And what we're doing right here is we're aligning around the industry standard. We're in planning with Humana and with Regents on that. Now we have clinical data needed to improve quality measures and coordinate care. We're already in production with Regents and Premera, where we're sending the necessary clinical data out of the EHR, via modern APIs and a FHIR format to our payer partners. 4 regions in Primera, and we're in process with Humana, and we're in process with CHPW on the West Coast. I mean, this is all very exciting, right? And this is just the tip of the iceberg, the idea, and we have this growing number of payers that we're working with on exchanging data this way. Also, we have financial performance on our shared value-based care contracts. Right now, the way financial performance is exchanged in value-based care is through ugly multi-tabbed Excel spreadsheets that change very, very often. And if we can get to exchange that data in a common format, we can load that data directly into our management performance systems and our planning and financial modeling systems rapidly. So we see a huge amount of potential here on the with VBPR. And then the last one here is feedback on patient gaps in care. Because the payers are often the arbiters of how we're performing on quality gaps, care gaps, things like that, we're talking about how we can get the payer's perspective in a standard format of how we're performing on clinical quality. And if we can get that standard format, then we can load that directly into our systems, our workflows, operations. We can reach out to the patients and share with them, bring the right folks in to manage their care. And also the payer and provider, we need to get to a place where we have a shared understanding of how we're performing on our value-based care contracts. They shouldn't have one understanding of the patient population. We have a different one, and we think Michael Westover has a certain gap in care, and the payer thinks that Michael Westover doesn't have that gap. We need to be able to come together, and the foundation is standardized data, modern APIs. Okay, so I wanted to show some of the data that's coming out recently, and we have never shared this with anyone before. So for the folks that are on the line today, I hope this is exciting for you as it is for me. How impactful has it been for us to move away from the way we were doing things to pulling the data out of our EHR using FHIR and modern APIs? And what we found is the number of patients with supplemental clinical data to address clinical quality measures increased by 47%. Like, that is a big deal. That means that providers aren't doing anything differently. That just means we're getting better at extracting the information that they are providing and sharing that information with the folks that need it. And that's very important to reducing burden to our provider populations. So why don't I talk quickly about how we were doing it and how we're doing it now. How we were doing it is we were using the EHR's reporting platform that's built for analytics and going in and writing, I think there's something like 60,000 tables in that database, and then writing queries with, let's say, 27 different tables within that database and trying to combine that with payer information and pull the relevant information out and then send it with the payers. And then what would happen is after we've written that query, 2 years down the line, it breaks. And then you have to find the person who wrote it, but that person doesn't work here anymore. And then you have to go in and figure out what was going on and fix it. It is not the way to do interoperability at scale, in my opinion. So what happened when we moved to using the FHIR APIs out of our EHR is that the data came out of the EHR for the patient population that we're looking for, using those standards already in FHIR. And then we're able to combine that with the payer information, so get the subset of information relevant to the request from the payer, in this case, quality and quality-related information for our quality measures, but it could be for other use cases too. And we can also put really strong QA and feedback loops around there to make sure the data increases. But just pulling the data natively out of our EHR in a FHIR format, we saw a massive increase in the amount of usable data. And when we spoke with our EHR vendor, they said, yes, we've been working really hard to map those FHIR APIs to make sure that they are accurate. So you can see we saw a 20% increase in the number of records related to the controlling high blood pressure measure. That's a HEDIS measure. And this is a big part of our contracts, right, that we have with our payer populations. We need to jointly work together to improve our performance on these measures so that we can perform well on the contract, so that the payer can do well in HEDIS. They can score well on their 5-star measures. It helps them with marketing. I mean, this is a big core of the payer organization's business, and also how we partner with them on these value-based care contracts. Also, you see that glycemic status assessment for patients with diabetes, 36% increase on the amount of data we were able to send, usable data we were able to send to the payers without any change in the provider's behavior. 65% increase in cervical cancer screening, 74% increase in breast cancer screening, and a 287% increase in colorectal cancer screening information that we can send to our payer partners. So this is a big deal. It is through the G10 APIs for those that are curious about it. And these G10 APIs are available for all certified EHRs, and the providers can decide who gets access to those G10 APIs. And we also pulled the information resource by resource, as opposed to in bulk for the entire population. So we did not use bulk FHIR. It doesn't work for populations of any size, but we pulled the information resource by resource, and we found that that is working pretty well for us. So we see a lot of potential here. We're excited about it. We see scale across multiple payers and more payers coming on and saying, it doesn't make sense to do this as a bunch of one-offs. Let's use standards and modern APIs to exchange this data. And I hope, curious to see what questions folks have coming up, but I will turn the time over to Mike Gould from Z Omega.
Thank you so much, Michael. It is amazing to see the actual data and to see how many folks you are working with. Again, as Michael said, this isn't just piloting, this is also production. And so this is real, it's happening, and it's showing real value. So thank you for that. And rounding us out for the evening, Michael Gould will be talking to us more about what's going on Vinci Trebuchet. And Mike is the Associate Vice President for Interoperability and Strategy at Z Omega. So it's all yours.
Thank you, Denise. And thank you, Karen and Michael and Scott for leading us through all this content today. There's a lot going on in Vinci in terms of pilots of different kinds, from payer cost transparency to burden reduction and clinical data exchange, that there's plenty of opportunity to participate in Trebuchet and other ways to make this all real. And as Michael said, I want to reiterate, it's for what's important to your organization. And if your organization views compliance with CMS 57 is important, or if you want to go beyond just compliance, that's important. And I'm really humbled to be in the company of the vanguard of folks that are trailblazing the way here with Multicare, with Regents and Cambia, with Providence and others. We at Z Omega, as a care management and utilization management health IT vendor, to reiterate what Scott had said earlier about getting vendors involved, whether it's your own corporate objectives or compliance, it's really important that you, as a provider organization or as a payer organization, bring your vendor to the table here. One of the things in my time at Z Omega for 3 years, and with the payer side and provider side experience that I've brought to the table before that, we've seen how there are those that are in the vanguard out front and leading, and there are those that are trying to figure out what to do and how to prioritize the work, and all that's really important with the different responsibilities that all of our organizations have to our members and to our patients, to the providers that care for us. And so we've taken a focus at Z Omega on the burden reduction stack, the CRD, DTR, and PAS implementation guides. And we've put together some pilots over time with organizations like the University of California, Davis, Blue Shield of California, and eHealth Exchange, just as some examples of folks that we've worked with to implement, whether it be in a sandbox environment or in a further along in a testing progression. We haven't quite gotten to the production phase yet with it. A number of our clients are implementing this now and are on the path to production, but we feel it's important that we address some of the questions that aren't even answered in regulation or in implementation guides. And one of those is scalability. And that's one of the important parts of Trebuchet. As we launch the Vinci implementation guides into implementation, there's also how we bring along fast implementation guides for scalability as well, and for security. So with that, we've also found that as we go about testing, we kind of, in getting started, have used some canned scenarios where we knew what the provider was going to order, and we knew that, for example, a prior auth would be required so that we could demonstrate the latter parts of it. But it's important to also test, and you saw how Karen mentioned that large percentage of their prior auth requests that don't even need a prior auth to be completed. So finding that out as well is important. But expanding beyond the few clinical scenarios that we had chosen to start testing things where you don't know what order is coming in. You don't know whether it's using a certain CDS hook or not. And to kind of open the door to the real world cases when you don't know what the provider's behavior is going to be out of the gate, so that you could follow it through to its expected conclusion. One of the things that we found that is required in this is that if you're going to open the door to random provider orders and whether or not they fit into the prior auth stack, that you're going to need the payer rules available for whatever scenario might come. So that's another body of work that has to be done. And that's one that we've embarked on with some of our clients as well. And along with that, one of the things that we've experienced in Trebuchet is that, a number of organizations, most organizations are still getting started with a lot of this. So finding other providers and other payers so that we could have a multiple provider, multiple payer environment, and that finding the right trading partner for the prior auth request that you're trying to process, and to do that routing that a network needs to provide, so that when, for example, Providence has a prior auth that they want to get to a specific payer with a number of payers in that network, how do they get to that payer correctly? And how does that payer get back to Providence correctly? So these are things that we're working on, some of the pilot work that we're doing as well. But as a vendor, a lot of our effort is driven by the clients that we serve. So, we are trying to bring our clients to the table in the Trebuchet project as well, and to work with the potential to build out new cohorts with the unique scenarios that our clients bring. For example, the particular EMR vendors that they want to interact with, perhaps the delegated vendors that they want to interact with as well. And one of the other things that I don't want to underestimate is the contribution that other Da Vinci members are making to the work in Trebuchet. You've heard a lot from Scott and from Michael and Karen, but there are other members of the Da Vinci project that are also contributing, participating or leading or co-leading the effort in Trebuchet. And that as we've started this up over the last year, and will continue into the next year as we see the milestones for 2026 and 2027 come into view, not just as something in the distant future, but as something that might be months or weeks away, that we're hoping and looking to bring in organizations as they're on their implementation trajectory and need to do the testing with other trading partners or with other similar partners, whether it's payer-to-payer exchange or other things outside of prior auth, that the Trebuchet environment is a good way to reach out to those other people that you need to test with on your way to production, so that you don't do that in isolation. And perhaps that the Trebuchet project also gives you the opportunity to do that in a way that helps you avoid some of the startup effort that has to go into establishing connection to others that are key partners in interoperability. So I'm going to close it here, and I'll hand back to Denise with a note of gratitude to Michael and Karen and Scott for their part. And before I hand it back to Denise, why don't we just go ahead and I'll do the call to action here that we're looking for folks to step up, participate in the biweekly calls in Trebuchet, tune in, listen in so you can get oriented to what's going on there and find the way that you want to participate, whether it is a point-to-point or a networked approach to doing Da Vinci use cases, whether it's for compliance or whether it's for other business drivers in your organization. And you'll start to see more about the cohort approach that we've taken and how we try to bring together complementary or similar organizations and the vendors that support them so that you can make the most of the ROI dollar for your investment with your vendors, as well as meeting the compliance needs and then identifying the opportunities for improving your business and other new opportunities through the implementations that Da Vinci and other accelerators bring to bear. So we meet Thursdays, 2 to 3 p.m. on alternate weeks bi-weekly. You can see the connection information here on the slide that you'll receive after today's session. And we welcome your questions at this time, but also your questions about Trebuchet. Even after today, Scott and I are certainly available to help you sort through whatever it might be that makes Trebuchet valuable for you. So Denise, do we want to open the floor up for questions?
We absolutely do. And thank you so much, Michael. And thank you, everyone, for presenting today. We encourage you to please use the Q&A option to ask us questions. We do have a couple of questions for you, Scott. So folks want to come on camera. And these, I think, are related. Maybe we address them in the reverse order. So if you could help folks understand the difference between networked FHIR and TEFCA FHIR, and perhaps talk a bit about TEFCA Lite.
Yeah, I think in general, what we're talking about here are the standards that are in use and whether or not we're complying fully with the SOP or the standard that is required within TEFCA. Networked FHIR, in general, what I'm talking about there is the use of an intermediary to communicate between 2 points, right? So that could be a payer-to-payer interaction with a clearinghouse in the middle. It could be a provider-to-payer burden reduction interaction with a network intermediary. That's really what we're talking about when we talk about networked FHIR. It's the ability to connect once into a network instead of connect individually point to point with each organization that you're trading data with. What we mean by TEFCA Lite is really to look at that TEFCA FHIR SOP and determine what it is we can comply with. When we think about TEFCA FHIR, there are there are things here that you can easily do, like you can implement UDAP or dynamic client registration, same thing there, right? So like TEFCA Lite might just be that you're doing dynamic client registration and doing a point-to-point integration from there and doing FHIR on top of that point-to-point integration. And what we're leaving out and why it's light is the patient discovery process, the XCPD query that would typically occur in advance of that, right? So we're not completely compliant with the way that TEFCA standardizes and says this is how you should do FHIR, but there's no need for that in a pilot where you don't actually need patient discovery or patient record location services. So that's what we mean by TEFCA Lite, is looking at those SOPs and complying with the SOPs that we really care to test or care to pilot, and leaving the remainder out so that we can test those later.
Excellent. Thank you for that. I know folks throw around the words and the terms and the acronyms all the time. And, if you ask people quickly define TEFCA, they, So it's really helpful to talk a little bit about what do we mean when we say these things. So again, we encourage you to use the Q&A menu option to submit a question, but we do have another question for you all. How does piloting, in your perspective, inform the go live in production? How does it help you scale to production? What is your hope and dream of starting in a piloting project? Who would like to talk a little bit about the process there for you?
I'd be happy to jump in there. You know, there's a number of capabilities, a number of competencies that organizations have. Some are stepping into using FHIR for the first time. Some have used it in the past to meet other requirements. And the interoperability aspect of the CMS 57 rule is also one that really pushes payer and provider collaboration to the next level. So what you've done before, you know, is going to be different from what we have to accomplish today. And you know, this is an accelerant in the health IT ecosystem to get payers and providers, you know, in some cases to reduce burden, in other cases to improve the patient experience, in other cases to, you know, realize provider efficiencies as well. So when you have an objective in mind for what production system or production data exchange or related IT competency you want to build, it's really an opportunity to come and test it with a number of different organizations that have that same or a complementary end in mind, right? So if you're one that wants to gather data, you might partner with others that are supplying data, or vice versa. So, you know, if you come with your objectives in mind, Trebuchet as a forum is an environment where you could find those that represent the real opportunities to test on your way into a production implementation. Michael or Scott or Karen, anything you want to add to that?
I'll just add, oh, there we go. I'll just add, and I'll kind of play off something Michael said earlier, when, you know, we start a pilot because we want to go to production right away. You know, that's what we're, you know, we'll pick what the use case that we want. And, you know, the piloting allows us to test the connectivity, do everything, you know, obviously do the testing. But once we have the testing, you know, we're ready to just move forward with, you know, once the validation, of course, as well, the various stages you go through in your technical process. We just, you know, we want to go then to production. So if the pilot works, we're ready to move.
And none of our organizations has infinite resources. So this is an opportunity to leverage things that are available in the community for you to accomplish your IT ends with regard to data exchange or aggregating data or some of the other uses that we've heard today.
And there are real world implications of this work. So in production, there are activities you need to accomplish as a provider, a payer, things you need to do for a patient. So having that opportunity to pilot in advance and know when you go into production, it is going to work, your workflows are going to work, data are going to be where they need to be. That's really valuable and important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Faster, better, cheaper, right? Like we can't afford it. So I would say that the relationships happen because
And
there's
one of the things I also want to stress about Trebuchet is that while we see the value of scalability through networks, TEFCA is not the only network paradigm that's out there. There may be, you know, local or regional networks that are more relevant for what you're trying to do. And there may be cases where it makes entire sense for your business to do a point-to-point connection rather than a network connection. So it really does depend on what your market and what your objections are, or your objectives. Objection.
And Michael, I think we might have had a little bit of a delay. Michael, go ahead.
I don't know if can you hear me, Denise?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, we can move on to the next thing.
Okay. Well, we've only got a couple of minutes left, but I'm curious, with the pilot work that you've done to date, um, what are maybe some of your big wins, your big learnings, the things you would have done differently based on what you know now going into a pilot project and or engaging specifically with Vinci Trebuchet?
So I'll speak up and say that I think one of the things that Scott talked about is the pre-pilot testing that we have to do in a number of cases. In some connectathon events, coming prepared in a way that you've already done some basic connectivity testing or some basic exchanges. We kind of lump that into the pre-pilot testing. And that's one of the things that we've learned along the way is that, there's a degree of interpretation that people can apply the implementation guides to their respective environments and the reality in which they work. Um, Karen mentioned about getting data to Azure, and Michael mentioned about using the G10 APIs that exist with EMR, with certified EMR technology. So there's particulars that need to be addressed in order to get to the point where you can actually test that exchange or the workflow that meets your objective. Scott, did you want to add anything about pre-pilot testing?
No, I mean, I think your point is important, right? It's important that organizations are not just testing with the sample mock requests that they've created for their internal tests. Like, your test data is probably pretty poor, and I think everybody recognizes that. And the best thing you can do is use another party that has great test data, right? Or like, another party that has access to create test data quickly because they have the right systems to do so. It makes so much sense. And that's one of the best values that I see for a lot of organizations doing testing today.
Yeah. A couple quick things that I wish I had known were that information security teams at provider organizations take a while to work through. And the ability to push that through quickly, I mean, it takes a long time to fight those battles because we're talking about patient data exchanged with external organizations. So I wish I had known that. And I also wish I had known to just not be so trusting on a lot of this stuff, right? Like, oh, there's a certified EHR functionality that everyone says works, so of course it will work. And then it doesn't work for our use case. Or here's a vendor, that's very large that can serve all of our needs for this. And then it doesn't work. Maybe it's built for a payer organization and really has no idea how to meet the needs for a provider organization. I think those learnings are invaluable, but I wish I had known some of these things beforehand. We could have moved faster.
Well said.
Excellent. Well, we are right at time. I cannot thank you all enough for your time and insights today. We're all very, very lucky to have you and our membership and all of the folks doing wonderful work with these IGs. You can always reach out to Alex, who we hope is enjoying some time away, well deserved, and to the DaVinci PMO with any questions, needs, next steps. There's tons of amazing content for you to access via Confluence, and you can, through the wonderful chat that Leslie's been giving us all this great information. A huge thanks to Leslie for helping us make this program work today and designing this program for us to provide you with information. There's a lot of additional information in the slides when you access those, and again, everything can be accessed via the Confluence page. So again, we'll see you on December 4th or December 10th. And please do complete the survey. Huge thank you to everyone. Everyone have a wonderful evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.